Hello fellow cinephiles, 90s Film Guru here, thanks for joining me today. I thought I'd do something a bit different this year. Rather than doing a video of films I hated or thought were crap, I wanted to do talk about films that were disappointing for the year. So films that aren't necessarily bad, they're just not as good as they really could have been, or as good as I really wanted them to be. So these are just 10 films I saw this year that I really wanted to like, but they weren't as good as I hoped they would be, or expected them to be. So, number 10, Priscilla. Now, I'm a fan of Sofia Coppola. I think she's a really good filmmaker, and I was hoping this was going to be her kind of return to form in a way. She hadn't made a really good film, or a film I really liked in quite some time. So I was hoping this was going to be that film, and unfortunately it wasn't. There's some good ideas in it. I like that we looked at the Elvis world and life from a different point of view, from Priscilla's point of view, the experiences she had and how she became part of that whole Elvis world was interesting, and the performances I thought were solid enough. But because it was cheaper, but with films like this, when you're doing a biopic, you really need to invest a bit more money into it. And I know that she did it as best she could, and she didn't really have a huge budget, and she crafted the story around what she was capable of. But I just felt for a biopic, it should have had injected a bit more money into it and spent a bit more time on particular aspects of the movie. There's things they touch on, but there's nothing they really go into depth with, and it feels a bit hollow. Number 9, Wolves. I'm not the biggest fan of the Spider-Man films. I thought the third one was quite good, that Jon Watts did, because it just felt like whenever Spider-Man was up against us, when he became the most interesting character in the film. I'm always intrigued to see directors coming from superhero movies and what they do next after their success with making those movies. And unfortunately, Jon Watts falls into that area where his next project, which was this film Wolves, it just wasn't very good. It felt like he was relying too much on its stars with Brad Pitt and George Clooney. And it also felt like it was more clever than it actually was. That's kind of what I got from the movie. He thought he was really clever in the stuff he was writing, and he thought it had a lot of humour and really great stuff, but it just fell flat, and a lot of the humour didn't work. Some of it did, but most of it didn't. And it just goes to show, once again, when these directors who do big budget superhero movies step out of that sort of world, they just can't seem to recapitalise on a smaller film and to move their career forward. Number 8, A Quiet Place Day One. I was a big fan of Quiet Place. The first one was really great, really well done. And I just really love what John Krasinski did with that film, and I really liked the performances and the story. The second film didn't like as much. It was still interesting, but not as much. And when they announced this one as Day One, I thought this could be interesting. It could be showing how it all began, where people were, and all that sort of stuff. But it doesn't focus on this family yet again. It focuses on someone completely different, which is fine, because it's showing us someone else within this world, and I get that. And the performances by Lupita Nyong'o is wonderful. She's really great, and I like her performance. But what this film really does is a big departure from what we saw before. Well, I thought it'd be like about survivors, and when this thing first happens, and how they learn to be quiet, and how they're trying to navigate in this world now that's taken over by alien creatures. And in certain aspects it does that. But it sort of shifts into trying to be an emotional story, like Lupita's character has cancer, and there's all these things that she wants to do, and she's fearful of going anywhere, and then when she goes out, then all these things happen, and she's trying to make it to somewhere in particular that tells a lot about her past. And along the way, she meets different people, but she comes in contact with Joseph Quinn's character, Eric. And it's about their journey together, which is, in that aspect's fine. It's just, because it shifted so much into something else, and I just didn't feel connected. I felt a bit bored with it. The characters weren't as in depth as I wanted them to be. And Joseph Quinn, I'm not huge on. I haven't seen him really in anything. I know he was in Stranger Things, but I didn't see his performance in that, and I know he's been in Gladiator 2. But there's just something about him I don't connect to. He's not bad, it's just doesn't connect to me, and it just feels like the whole journey and everything that happens and the sacrifices they make doesn't seem worth it in the end. And I just felt very disappointed by the film. I'm not saying it's a bad movie, it's a solid movie, I just didn't enjoy it as much as I wanted to. Number 7, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. This film, just didn't need to be made, in my opinion. Yes, there are cool stuff in it. Like we get to see this different tribe with these apes, and one ape in particular has to become sort of a warrior, and he has to go on this journey to do that. I like that aspect. I like the characters he meets along the way, and I like the relationship between him and the female human character, which I thought was really cool. But it just felt like it didn't serve any purpose. It didn't really need to be there or be made. And like a friend of mine said to me, it was really like them putting their toe in the water to see if people were still interested in Planet of the Apes and wanted to see more of it. And so it didn't really do much in that regard, and the fact that it was going to be, it feels like something that's part of a trilogy or whatever that we may never get. It just felt pointless and hollow in a lot of ways. Even though it did have entertaining things in it, and the ape stuff is really well done, like the visual effects was quite extraordinary in the place we got to with those, but it just didn't really do much for me as an overall film. Number 6, Wicked. Now, this isn't a usual film I would go and see, and I just got really into the Wizard of Oz book and the world and the characters, and so I thought this would be an extension of that. And mind you, I've never read the book that this is based on or the play. I've never seen the musical either. So it didn't have the same impact, I guess, for other audience members than other audience members it would. And look, there's some great stuff in it. I think Cynthia Erivo was really good in it. I think she's really great. The character she plays is really interesting. The Wicked Witch, I kind of like that and really humanises it. I love the singing and the music and everything she does in it. I like the world. It does not feel like Wizard of Oz to me, but it is an interesting world nonetheless. I like that it starts at the end with, you know, the Wicked Witch's ultimate demise, and they talk about Dorothy and touch on that, which obviously that'll lead into after the second part, maybe even at the end of the second part. And most of the performances I thought were really solid. Ariana Grande, I did not care for in this movie. I don't think she's terrible. I just didn't care for her character. That just felt like a ditzy blonde who's manipulative of everybody around her. I just didn't like that portrayal of that particular character, Glinda. And I think Glinda is I think Glinda's the evil one in the story, in the Wizard of Oz story, in the Wizard of Oz movie, and sort of here as well. But she was the main reason I struggled with the film. Every time she came on screen and performed, I just didn't care for it, and it really frustrated me. Jeffrey Goldblum was solid. I liked Emerald City. I liked the design of it. I liked the practicality of a lot of places we went. But it just lacked something for me. I think it was I didn't like the Glinda character, and that grinded on me. And it just felt very different to the Wizard of Oz world that I'd known. And I think that's what let it down for me. It wasn't a bad film, it just wasn't as good as I hoped or expected. Number 5, Challenges. Now look, don't get me wrong, this is a solid made film. The performances are great, especially from Zendaya, who really is the star of the movie and does a fantastic job. And I'm a huge fan of Luca. I think Luca is a really wonderful filmmaker. Bones and All I really loved, and Suspiria I really thought was really great as well. And I hoped that this film, Challenges, would be in that realm. And it kind of is, but isn't. And I felt disappointed with the film. I remember when I first saw the trailer, and I didn't think it was something I was really that excited about. I want to see, and my mates kept talking about it, so I sort of rewatched the trailer, and I started to see this could be quite good. And there's aspects to the film I really liked, like Zendaya and the two guys, and there's a particular scene where they're sort of, it's a romantic scene per se, in a hotel room. I really loved that, where she steps back and she watches them. It's like she's manipulating them to do what she wants, and there's some really great stuff in that particular sequence. Just the rest of the film lacked that. You've got this tennis match, which I know the film's not completely really about tennis, it's about relationships and love and all that sort of stuff. But I just felt the tennis match kind of like was anticlimactic. It wasn't a big match, it was this small match of a guy trying to get back to his roots, and I just didn't care much for that. And there was a choice of music that came in every time that scenes got intense that I didn't love either. And I just felt it wasn't, it doesn't live up to the hype that was surrounded this film. Now, like I said, it's not bad, it's just not for me, and I just didn't enjoy it as much as I really hoped I could. Number 4, Trap. Now, with M. Night's return with the previous film, Knock at the Cabin, I really liked that. I thought that was return form, and I had hoped this would be a continuation of that, where this kind of, these aspects that I liked. I thought Josh Hartnett was really great in it and did a great job. I liked the idea of it set it completely, mostly, at a concert, and about this serial killer being trapped and how he navigates around that and tries to break free of his constraints of the concert and the police presence that are trying to capture him. As someone said, they've said this is a comedy. I agree. On my second viewing this, I liked it a lot more, and I felt it was very funny and interesting. But it just didn't live up to the trailer. The trailer set up this really interesting thing to see Josh Hartnett returning and to have this sort of concept happening, and the trailer revealing certain aspects of it. That trailer was really great, but the film just didn't live up to that. The dialogue was very clunky. It felt very silly. It felt less like his return or his good films like Sixth Sense or Signs or Knock at the Cabin, and more like movies like Old or The Happening, and films that weren't as popular or as great of a filmmaker as he could be. And I felt that this film just kind of lacked that. I think his concepts are great. I think he needs probably someone to write his dialogue for him. It just fell short of what I wanted it to be. The whole film doesn't take place at the concert, which I think it should have. There's way too much shots of M. Night's daughter, the character, singing, and I wanted more of Josh Hartnett trying to work out what to do and how to get out of there than we actually got. It's beautifully shot and there's some interesting ideas, and it just didn't get to where I really wanted it to. Number 3, Boy Kills Will. Now, don't get me wrong, I liked this movie a lot. The first half of it was great. It was funny and interesting. I liked the martial arts aspect. I liked the sort of history of the character, and that he doesn't speak and he has this internal voice that's different to the way he would speak, and I liked that. It made it very funny and entertaining. Skarsgård was really great in it. Like, Bill's kind of an interesting actor. Jessica Rothe I thought was good in it as well. And it is very fun and entertaining. But what lets the film down is the second half, or the ending, where there's a particular twist that happens. For those who haven't seen it, for those who have, you know what I'm talking about. And it just kind of lets the film down, in my opinion. It just makes it go in this sort of really serious direction when it was kind of fun and entertaining. And it should have stayed in that realm, in my opinion, but it sort of went off in this different direction. And by the end of the film, you're just like feeling like, what was the point of it all? Why did this happen? How did this unfold? And the purpose behind how this character, or young boy who becomes a man, who's created, and why he was created, what he was created for. It just lets the film down. But it is still an entertaining movie, and it is worth watching. It's just not what I expected. Number 2, Furiosa. Now, with Fury Road, I was so impressed with that film. I love what George Miller did with it. It was very entertaining, bringing us back into that world, and the idea of just this, you know, you've got Max and you've got Furiosa, and these girls are trying to save, and this journey in the truck and their return back. All of that was really great. The action was great, very practical and fun and well done, and I was really impressed. So when he announced that he was going to do a Furiosa movie, I must admit I was intrigued. I was hoping it was going to be really good and show this interesting character. And in some aspects it did, but it just spent too much on certain areas. There was a lot more digital in this than the previous film. Some of the characters were pointless. Hemsworth's character I didn't care much for. I like the concept of him thinking he's some sort of Roman emperor, and the way he sort of has his group and his men, and the way he rides that quote-unquote chariot that he has. I thought that was great, but his character just didn't live up to that particular, what they had set up for him. And Anya Taylor-Joy is fine in the film and does a solid job, but she doesn't emote as much emotion, or doesn't say too much with her expressions, where someone like Charlize Theron is great. She does a really great job to emote that. She is older and has much more experience. I'm not saying Anya Taylor-Joy is not an experienced or talented actress. It's just, it lacks something there for me. And it just sets up this revenge story that doesn't really happen. It doesn't really happen the way you want it to or expect it to. And you've got like, Furiosa sort of disappears for a bit of the film, and then there's a character going, oh, who's that? And we're like, oh, that's right, she did exist. And was very, very disappointed in the film, and felt he really didn't need to do this story because we already knew what happened to Furiosa in Fury Road. I would have preferred him to do another film within that world, something different, which he was going to do, but he chose to do this first, and we'll probably never get that other film. It's just a film that divided audiences, and I just wasn't as impressed with it as I wanted to be. Before I get to number one, there's some honourable mentions. This next particular film I want to talk about is it wasn't too bad. It wasn't a bad film. It was. I saw the TV Glow. I did not care for that movie. I love the concept. I love the atmosphere that the director creates. I thought the main actress did a really wonderful job, and I loved her character, and I really wish the film was from her perspective rather than the other character. But it just sort of meandered around. It wasted time. It didn't take advantage of the concept, this TV program, and the impact that it has, and the idea that this world could be real and these characters might not be what they seem was really great, but they never took advantage of that. It just it hit a point in the film where it could have ended. It hit it, and it was a solid ending, and we could have went on and been revealed to all this stuff. But instead they chose to go in a different direction. And then the film just keeps going and going, scene after scene, and the character talks to the camera, and then he changes appearance, and he gets older, and then we have these moments of whether what he was told was real or wasn't real, and I really hated it. I really felt it was such a waste of time. It could have been a really great film. Really not impressed with the movie. Anyway, I won't talk too much about that. I know people probably really loved it. I just wasn't one of those. Number one, the most disappointing film of the year for me was Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. I was hoping this was going to be great. I really loved Ghostbusters Afterlife, the previous film, the way it brought all the original films together and gave us new characters and had a really wonderful moments in it, and brought the old Ghostbusters back and mixed them with the new. Set in a small town. Everything about that film I loved. It took me back to childhood. It reminded me of movies like Goonies and movies that I really enjoyed, of kids getting mixed up in sort of adult things. I loved that. And so I was hoping, when they announced the sequel, I was a bit hesitant because I just felt, well, how can you do better than what you've done here? And then when I heard more about it, I kept thinking, okay, if they're going to do a sequel, there's two things I want. I want them to return to New York, and I want them to be back in the firehouse. And they did that. They were returned to that, and then they did that aspect I liked, and I liked the sort of younger characters being part of that world, and they expanded it with this another team. There's all these really great things, and the opening's really cool, with this frozen hotel room. It's really great. I love that aspect to it. And I thought the performance was solid, but what really let me down is the Phoebe character. They just sidelined her, and they just pushed her out of the way, yet she was the one who brought everything together and worked things out and was becoming the hero. And they just pushed her aside. You can't be part of this, you're too young. And I just didn't, once they did that, I just didn't care. It lacked anything that had heart. She was the heart and soul of the previous film. And without that, it just felt flat. It's like, oh, we've already introduced this and shown the heart of the character. Why do we need to do any more? And it just really disappointed me in a lot of ways. Anyway, that's it. That's my top 10 most disappointing films of the year. It's been an interesting year for a lot of films, and this is just my list of disappointing movies. So, to all my viewers and subscribers, thank you for joining me on this journey this year, and I hope you continue to follow me on the journey next year. Until next time, enjoy the movies.